In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Brazil was grappling with one of the worst inflation crises in modern history. The country's economy was a textbook example of chaos. Inflation rates soared to unimaginable levels, peaking at over 2,500% annually in 1993. Prices for basic goods could double within weeks, making everyday financial planning nearly impossible for ordinary Brazilians. Families would rush to supermarkets on payday to buy essentials before prices climbed even higher. This hyperinflation was the result of decades of economic mismanagement. Brazil had relied heavily on printing money to finance public spending, particularly during its military dictatorship, 1964 to 1985, and subsequent democratic transition. Public debt ballooned, trust in the government dwindled, and attempts to curb inflation through price freezes, currency reforms, and even confiscation of savings had failed spectacularly. The currency itself had become a joke. Over a few decades, Brazil had cycled through multiple currencies, Cruzeiros, Cruzados, Cruzados Novos, each introduced with promises of stability, but all eventually succumbing to the same inflationary spiral. Brazilians had grown cynical, assuming that every new economic plan would collapse just like the last. The economic crisis also became a deeply social one. The middle class saw their savings erode, businesses struggled to plan ahead, and the poor suffered disproportionately as wages lagged far behind skyrocketing prices. The entire economy was trapped in a vicious cycle. Inflation fueled mistrust. Mistrust fueled more inflation, and no government seemed able to break the pattern. Against this bleak backdrop, a group of economists led by Finance Minister Fernando Henrique Cardoso devised a bold and unconventional solution to restore stability. Their tool? A virtual currency that would reset economic expectations and rewrite the rules of the game. When Brazil's inflation crisis reached its zenith in the early 1990s, it was clear that traditional approaches wouldn't work. Past governments had tried everything: freezing prices, replacing currencies, and even forcing businesses to display fixed prices on shelves. Yet these measures failed because they attacked symptoms, not the root cause: rampant money printing to fund public deficits and a lack of trust in the monetary system. Enter the Real Plan, one of the most innovative economic stabilization programs in history. The architects of the plan knew they needed a solution that addressed both the technical and psychological aspects of hyperinflation. Inflation isn't just an economic problem, it's also a behavioral one. When people expect prices to keep rising, they spend faster, demand wage hikes, and adjust prices upward, fueling an endless cycle. We talked about this in our Theories of Inflation video. We called it the wage price spiral. The Real Plan aimed to break that cycle through a mix of fiscal discipline, currency reform, and a groundbreaking idea: the introduction of a virtual currency to reset expectations. Step 1. Laying the fiscal groundwork. Before addressing inflation directly, the Real Plan tackled Brazil's structural economic problems. The government implemented fiscal reforms to reduce the budget deficit, curbing its reliance on printing money. At the same time, the Central Bank of Brazil tightened monetary policy, restricting the money supply to curb inflationary pressures. Interest rates were raised to discourage excessive borrowing and consumption. Step 2. Introducing the URV, a virtual currency. The most innovative part of the Real Plan was the creation of the Unit of Real Value, URV, a virtual currency that served as a transitional bridge to stability. The URV wasn't physical money, it existed only as a reference unit for pricing and accounting. The idea was simple but revolutionary. While people continued using the Cruzeiro, the official currency, prices, wages, and contracts were denominated in URVs. The URV was pegged to the US dollar, providing a stable measure of value that was immune to the chaotic fluctuations of the Cruzeiro. Each day, the central bank adjusted the conversion rate between the Cruzeiro and the URV to reflect inflation. For example, if a loaf of bread cost 100 cruzeiros today, it might cost 105 cruzeiros tomorrow. But its price in URVs remained steady at, say, 1.00 URV. This dual currency system allowed Brazilians to mentally separate their understanding of value from the unstable cruzeiro. The genius of the URV lay in its psychological impact. By giving people a stable reference point, it started to shift expectations. Shopkeepers began setting prices in URVs instead of cruzeiros, reducing the habit of marking up goods preemptively. Workers negotiated wages in URVs, and businesses started accounting in URVs, which gradually normalized the idea of a stable currency. Step 3. Transitioning to the real. After several months of using the URV, the final step was to replace the cruzeiro with a new currency, the real. On July 1st, 1994, the real became Brazil's official currency, replacing the cruzeiro at a 1-to-1 URV exchange rate. By this point, the groundwork laid by the URV had stabilized prices, making the transition to the real seamless. The real was also pegged to the US dollar initially, which helped anchor inflation expectations. While this peg was eventually abandoned, it played a key role in the early days of the real plan by giving the new currency credibility. The real plan was an immediate success. Inflation, which had exceeded 2,500% in 1993, plummeted to just 22% in 1995, and by the end of the decade it had reached single digits. For the first time in decades, Brazilians could save money without watching its value evaporate overnight. The economy stabilized, foreign investment poured in, and Brazil entered a period of sustained growth. The real plan's success is deeply connected to the concept of money illusion, which refers to people's tendency to think of money in nominal terms rather than real terms. In other words, people often focus on the face value of currency without fully accounting for inflation's impact on purchasing power. During Brazil's hyperinflation, money illusion was a significant factor that perpetuated the crisis. As prices rose dramatically, people adjusted their financial behaviours based on the rapidly depreciating nominal value of the cruzeiro. This led to preemptive price increases. Businesses would frequently raise prices, not just in response to current inflation, but in anticipation of future inflation. Distorted wage demands. Workers demanded wage increases based on skyrocketing nominal prices, which created a wage price spiral. Erosion of trust in currency. People stopped believing that the cruzeiro held any stable value, fueling hyperinflation. Because people focused on nominal values rather than real values, they were trapped in a cycle of inflationary expectations, which reinforced the problem. The introduction of the unit of real value, URV, was specifically designed to counteract money illusion by shifting people's focus from the unstable nominal cruzeiro to a stable real value. Here's how it worked. Stabilizing price expectations. The URV provided a consistent reference point for prices and wages, pegged to the US dollar. This allowed people to think in real terms, decoupling their financial decisions from the cruzeiro's wild fluctuations. Breaking the inflation cycle. By denominating contracts and prices in URVs, the plan removed the need for businesses and workers to anticipate inflation, effectively breaking the wage price spiral. Rebuilding trust. The URV's stability restored confidence in the monetary system, reducing reliance on nominal cruzeiros and preparing the public for the transition to the real. A psychological reset. The odd thing with inflation that becomes absolutely unhinged with hyperinflation is that people tend to think in nominal terms, which means they think in dollars rather than real terms, which is how many goods those dollars can buy. When inflation is low, that doesn't matter that much, because prices do not change by a lot, so we're wrong, but not that wrong. When there is hyperinflation, we are very wrong, so wrong that we can't even think of what's real anymore. This is not our fault. When prices increase by 30% each week, you need to walk around with an AI buddy just to keep things straight. So we react to this by demanding even higher wages because we just think the future is going to be much, much worse. The URV basically anchored Brazilian expectations in a very clever way. No one had to calculate anything. The URV just did it for you, and you just had to get your daily URV reminder of how much your wages were worth in real term. This took away the need to guess future inflation, because if you negotiated your wages on the basis of the URV, you didn't have to. So the part of hyperinflation that was caused by people guessing wrong just died right then and there. To be fair, this virtual currency had been invented in Chile nearly 30 years prior, so these guys didn't really invent it, but it sure was a clever use of the concept. We will do another video on real versus nominal thinking to explain this concept. Stay tuned, money enthusiasts.